Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. You're listening, watching the Bible Forum. You may not have been here Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time to see it live and in person, but you are now watching it on a video, and we're happy to make that available to you. I ran across an article this week having to do with gun sales in America, and I'm beginning to understand in a way that I had not in the past why we have so many folks, usually of the liberal persuasion, interested in eliminating guns from our society. You see, apparently a blogger added up the deer license sales in just a handful of states, and his conclusion, what he ended up with, was something that shocked him. And I think it might shock you too. In the state of Wisconsin, last year, there were over 600,000 hunters. They applied for a license. You heard it, 600, that's more than 500,000. Wisconsin's hunters, not gun owners, hunters, are now the 8th largest army in the world. They have more men and women under arms than does Iran, more than France and Germany combined. That's not all the gun owners, just those that went hunting legally. These men deployed to the woods of a single American state, Wisconsin, to hunt with firearms, and guess what? Not one person was killed. But that number's not as high as Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, 750,000 people hunted in the woods last year. I doubt they all were out there with sticks and stones. They had to get a permit to have a gun. Michigan had 700,000. All of these people returned home safely. Toss in 250,000 hunters in West Virginia, and it literally establishes the fact that the hunters of only 4 American states comprise the largest army in the world. And we haven't even added the other 46 states. Keep in mind, these are not southern states. They're mountainous states, they're good hunting states, but they're not southern states. You get the point? America will forever be safe from foreign invasion with that kind of firepower. Hunting is not just a way to fill the freezer. It's also a matter of national security. And that's why all enemies, foreign and domestic, want to see Americans disarmed. Food for thought when next we consider gun control. And overall, it's true. So if we disregard some assumptions that hunters don't possess the same skills as soldiers, the question would still remain: what army of 2 million people would want to face these kinds of citizenry? For the sake of our freedom, we dare not ever allow gun control or the confiscation of guns. So the question becomes, as always, who will you vote for? You wouldn't believe it listening to the news, but the latest reports from the Bureau of Justice Statistics indicates that gun violence is actually down. Statistically, we're safer now than we were in the 1990s. Think about it. Firearm-related homicides declined 39% between 1993 and 2011, from 18,253 to 11,101. Non-fatal firearm crimes declined 69% from 1.5 million victims in 93 to 467,000 in 2011. At the same time, the quantity of guns purchased has increased dramatically. How many guns do Americans own? There are 317 million Americans. They own 367 million firearms. You know any armies that size? On Black Friday, and I assume that's last year, over 185,000 Americans had a background check in order to purchase a firearm. That is a new one-day record. It's also worth pointing out that during that same period, the number of Americans who have permits to carry a concealed handgun had risen exponentially, with estimates ranging from 11 to 15 million. In fact, in some states, 8 to 12% of the population has a permit to carry a concealed handgun. So what's going on? If our politicians say we're safer, and statistically we are, why are we seeing such a rush to acquire firearms and permits to carry concealed weapons? I know some of you will argue that we're safer because more Americans are able to defend themselves in public and private, but what about the perception of safety versus the actual safety? Do we feel safer? The answer is no. The Gallup poll works in these areas. And they say we know that a majority of Americans have consistently viewed violent crime as a major problem in the United States. Another bipartisan poll shows that a majority of Americans now believe that they are less safe today than they were prior to 9/11. That's actually a major change compared to previous polls. The evidence would indicate that Americans are actually safer, but they don't feel like it. Might it be some combination of mass media, greater mobility, a sense of being surrounded by strangers that's leading to this feeling of insecurity? And if so, what does that mean? The late sociologist Robert Nisbet touched on this stage of societal decline in a book he wrote called Twilight of Authority. And he wrote this in 1975. He said it was this way in the ancient world. In Greece and Rome, the Alexanders, the Caesars sprang out of political and social breakdown. So too, after the waning of medieval society, do we see in the Renaissance the rise of military monarchies and princedoms, all in the setting of dislocation and decay of accustomed authority. He points to the widening perception of breakdown in the non-military society areas of life, family, neighborhoods, common culture, followed by an enhanced position on the military, government stepping up to maintain the perception of order. All of this resulting in an increasing number of citizens, including intellectuals, to a fascination in the uses of power in times of crisis, creating insecurities. When the government can no longer provide our security, we worry. When worrying, we become less secure. TV, internet, etc. bring us immediate visions of every alarming event. Feeling alone, we find ways to increase our personal security. Therefore, we buy guns. Nisbet warns that the worst thing to add to the mix would be terrorism. Again, he's writing in 1975, if terror, as manifested by such groups as the PLO, the IRA, increases by the same rate during the next decade as it has during the past, it is impossible to conceive of liberal representative democracy continuing. With its crippling processes of due process and historic endowments of immunity before or protection by the legal process. So here we are, 40 plus years after Nisbet's warnings, in a society that's breaking down when considering the collapse of traditional societal institutions, rocked by terrorism and alarmed by the growing domestic police state. Our current system features both worlds. The conservatives who want to live in harmony with the old ways, Constitution, biblical morality, sound fiscal practices, and the progressives who want to try new things which aren't really new at all, like abandoning the constraints of the old ways in favor of just about anything they can think up. And if that doesn't work, we'll think up something else. And the problem here is that while we're tinkering with the foundation, the walls are crumbling. Do you have a gun? Why do you have a gun? Do you think you're safer now than you were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago? You probably have a gun. Do you have a security system on your house, on your car? Why? We didn't have those things in 1950. We didn't have to. Think about it.